The Overwatch League has vastly improved this year. A lot of you that have tuned into our previous breakdown or checked into the league are noticing this, that the OWL format as well as the competitive balance is really yielding to a watchable esport that's entertaining. And a couple sus years in there, but this kind of energy reminds me of year one. So I'm toying around with different video formats to see how we can cover it and what you guys are interested in. Today we're going to do a discussion video recapping the recent events of the top teams in the knockout phase, heading into the May Melee tournament, and then make our predictions on who's going to take the whole thing in this little mini early stage one type playoff event. And if there's time, give a quick recap on the other teams and how they're faring. And the major theme that's going on in the league right now is that because there's so many styles relevant, it's difficult to game plan prep for all of them or be strong at all of them. I actually think the two best teams in the league right now have already played. You may not have watched this match because it was in the Eastern region, but the Philly-Shanghai Dragons matchup was insane, going to 6 maps and really stressing all the different compositions that you can run. These are the only two teams that I would say have a high degree of competency in both the Rush Rhine comps as well as the Double Bubble and the Poke. They can play all three. And time permitting, I may go back and take a look at this because the peak level of gameplay that was required for both of these teams to keep extending this series and ultimately the Dragons to come out on top was incredible. If you haven't watched it, you have no idea how good Carpe and Mano were playing at parts of this to ultimately lose in the knockout phase. It's a little unfortunate, the format of the East, in my opinion. The Dragons were supposed to be the lowest ranked seed coming into it at 2-2. The Hunters and the Seoul Dynasty got to play each other being 3-1, but their 2 losses were to Philly. This is something I hope they fix because I think if Philly could have chosen, they would have taken either of the opponents they've already beat. But on top of that, it also is interesting to discuss because their style is the only team Chengdu has lost to yet, and that's going to come into effect later on when we talk about the Chengdu matchup. But either way, Philly definitely choked in this matchup against the Dragons, and if they weren't able to beat them now, it's not likely they're going to rise to the occasion in a tougher matchup later in the tournament anyway. So regardless, they needed to play better in order to win, but it's just insane the level that they even were able to achieve to get that series to 6 maps. For Philadelphia, it's a super feels bad because it just seems like no matter what, this team is doomed to dropping out or getting second or going so far, but just not doing enough. I do think they did rise to the level that the Dragons brought to them under some severe adversity, and the two players that stood out as having the weakest performances in this matchup to me was Rascal and Toby, who just weren't as comfortable positioning and timing wise as their opposition. And when you have players that can come in like Funny Astro and Shockwave, if they ever sort that visa issue out, then getting them in the mix a bit more to play certain roles or just flat out start, which I think would be the case for the Lucio position, at least for Funny Astro, I think you might start to see that Philly is stronger than we think. Like, they're short 2 really competitive players from their roster and still took this to 6 maps, okay? It's hard to take that as a positive because they definitely could have won this series with just a few more plays going their way. So moving on to the Chengdu Hunters win over the Dynasty, the odd thing to me of why Chengdu, I think, is always going to have a good fighting chance against Seoul is because if you watch the Dynasty over the years, this is a team that basically refuses to play any easy strategy. What I mean is, when do we ever see them try to go towards heroes like Mei or Moira, strategies that are more about your teamwork playing together as opposed to individual mechanics? They're one of the top teams that will opt in to any skill-based battle whenever you give them the opportunity, so they oblige the Hunters in their Chengdu Hunter poke comp fragtastic playstyle, and they lost. If Chengdu has proven anything so far, they've proven they can play those poke comps that are about taking angles and deathmatching, particularly their strongest look, playing around Jinmu's Pharah. I'll have more to say about the prediction section on them, but just to roll through the other matches, Toronto Defiant fans, I know many of you were upset when I was particularly low on this team. I think they've proven in the qualifying stages that they weren't as low as I put them, but I do think that their peak is as a knockout level team. The Florida Mayhem just simply being a tier above them, I don't know if the Defiant will ever routinely beat the level of team that could go up to win a tournament in that like A tier bracket. Toronto had one of the easiest schedules of any team, which is what got them here. And I think you're going to find that it's going to be a harder road to go for the rest of the season, lacking in some key areas that are going to limit this team's ability to really punch above its weight. But competing for knockouts seems to be a reasonable placement for this team. They went 5 maps against the Reign, for example, which means they will be competitive at the mid-table and be able to steal a win here or there. But this match against the Florida Mayhem was a bit of a reality check. Florida went on to take down a team that many were hailing as the behemoths of NA with just overwhelming skill. But the thing that ended up happening in these NA matches, and we'll get to more talking about the Dallas ones as well, team's ability to play high-level Reinhardt rush compositions was really coming in full force. And although against most other teams, Florida was weaker on rush and stronger on the dive double bubble, the greenness of the Washington Justice roster going up against some league veterans like OGE was really starting to show. So far, Mag has indeed put up enough film to throw his hat into the ring for Rookie of the Year. He's been excellent. This team is brimming with talent, especially with players like Bebe, proving that some of those Chinese teams have some odd management and seemingly lock people up in roster jail. I think Bebe has been stepping up in a big way. And I think a player like Slime, who I was high on, part of the reason why I kept the Florida Mayhem in A tier in my preseason tier list video. But I think really you noticed the importance of that role across the entire day, where if your Lucio or Brig player is kind of lacking and isn't ready for the prime time top tier competition, or perhaps more explicitly, they're syncing up with their main tank to create engages and rotations, well, you can just instantly lose team fight after team fight in the rush mirror in Reinhardt comps. And I think part of that synergy is what made OGE look so dominant up against Mag on the Reinhardt looks. And speaking of MTD, the Dallas Fuel steamrolled the opposition in a style all on their own. That kind of goes to show you how this matchup meta is so important. Since Dallas are lacking a DPS player that can play some of the top meta picks, they instead invested more heavily in a niche strat, Symmetra and Mei, which has been run in a lot of max brawl style maps, especially like Control, where you can literally just hide on the point, playing around Mei walls and sim turrets to just slow the enemy down and really just grind out the objective. But unlike any team I've ever seen, I can remember just talking about this like years ago when they finally introduced the mid-fight sim TP that you can use to transport teams around. Teams have kind of used it in order to like surprise Bastion into positions, but Dallas truly this past week was using the sim TP in order to create engagements and path in really unpredictable ways that both the Shock and the Houston Outlaws just kind of fell victim to be honest. Time permitting, I may take a look back at these strategies, but it may be even more fruitful to just wait for them to play in the tournament, because I honestly think there's no reason a pro team should lose to this as harsh as they have. The counters to me are so obvious that when they go up against a team like Chengdu, who is more than happy to play the spam comps with Pharah or whatever counter pick styles required for the situation, I'd anticipate that when those styles clash, Dallas just simply won't win a map against Chengdu running the Symmetra Mei. It's that clear and simple. I feel like the Shock and Houston didn't realize how all in the comp was and tried to do some half measures to adapt, especially when you look at Houston Outlaws, who have been dominating in Reinhardt-based comps for the past few weeks. I think we're just a little bit more prep. They'd realized that Django was going to have no chance going up against the Sim Mei, and you would have been better off just avoiding any type of brawl playstyle like the Chengdu Hunters do when they play, and use your tanks just as like glorified DPS, basically. Like, just don't tank. That's how these team comps interact. One is basically goats. It's all close range. And if you try to run some brawl into McCree, well, then your tank dies. McCree can't find any shots, and just you lose, basically. Now, a reasonable question to ask, is this showing the kinks in the San Francisco Shock's armor? Big match comes up, a wacky strategy comes at them, and they, just like the Houston Outlaws, fall to some of this team comp that really goes all in on your main tank. What the Mei Melee has showed me about the Shock so far is reminding me how inflexible they are early on in any meta. And the interesting thing is, because the game is so well balanced now, it's more difficult to find that one team comp that the Shock can refine in the way they've done in the years past. Another question might be, how big was Junk Buck, who got poached over to the Houston Outlaws, to the Shock's ability to adapt in these situations? The Shock did a lot of suspect team comps and some really odd personnel changes that in previous years made them look like geniuses when it worked, but so far in this tournament have me a little bit concerned. I anticipate that in the hero pool formats, they'll do better, but maybe there isn't the flexibility on this roster that you need when you may need to switch your composition entirely in order to deal with the enemy's doing. As an example, the series up against Houston ended on Havana, where they ran double shield on the defense, but then Smurf, without a Lucio, was on Reinhardt for the attack, and it just felt like a big percentage of why they lost was the team comp. And I think that's sort of been happening too, where they're trying to find their most ideal McCree player setup. Twilight plays well on the Ana, and Violet has periods where he looks insane, but both him and Striker are a little shaky on the role, and that's just not what you need in order to be a top team right now. In the past, the Shock have been able to have a little bit weaker of a DPS performance, but still overcome it with just pristine positioning and teamwork. But the game is so hectic right now that it's difficult, it seems, for them to find time to really get into that refining their process mode. I wouldn't sell your San Francisco Shock Stonks just yet, but it's definitely indicating a set of problems that they're going to have to figure out how to deal with, and may resurface once they remove hero pools from the later tournaments and especially the playoffs. If truly multiple comps are in the meta at one time, can the Shock deal with it when their bread and butter has been refining one? This came as a bit of a surprise because normally the Sim May comps would get switched off on more wide open maps where a McCree could get a sight line, but their really intelligent use of the teleporter shrunk the map instantly by teleporting right onto them and kind of surprising them on the spots they were jumping out of. I'm gonna be real, there's no way this continues to work for the rest of the tournament, especially against the Chengdu Hunters who pick heroes that fly, right? It's just, you're not gonna lose a rotation battle to this. So this kind of thing is a really hard call for a pro coach to make, and maybe they in no way were prepared to do this, but I almost wish Houston would have just put Jake in on Projectile, because he plays Pharah and Junkrat, characters that would make this Sim May playing out in the open strat not look anywhere near as good, but as the saying goes, dance with who brought you. If you don't get the analogy, you know, dance with your partner that you brought to the dance as opposed to sort of cheating on them by finding a new one at the last moment just because it's convenient for you. But characters like Echo, Doomfist McCree, Sombra Tracer, like these guys can play all of these to an elite level, but none of them have that immediate burst impact against this uber death ball that the Dallas Fuel are running, right? Echo is better Pharah, but Pharah is better for this situation because of just how bursty her damage is. A big rocket coming through, and also don't undersell the concussive blast from her or even Junkrat's mines to like displace this comp, to just get them apart a little bit. Against most things, Echo's dueling or her value with duplicate is going to be better, but if you need the engagement to go well right now and you have to shoot one ability, like the big burst explosion damage projectiles from Pharah or Junkrat would have been better suited for this task, and you have those players on your roster, so it just sucks that we couldn't see that matchup happen. Now, when we start to look at the schedule for this week, remember that this is a double elimination bracket, so these teams will go head-to-head, fall down to the losers, and then make a trek back to attempt to get to the finals. The way I'd anticipate this going is Shanghai 3-2 over Florida at worst, but I could see them shutting them out even more so. What's going to depend is how high of a peak they've actually accomplished and how right I am in assuming that the Dragons Fusion were the best teams in the league this week. The more right that is, the more this might be a blowout. Because the truth is, like a lot of these teams, the Dragons are the only team here that I actually think like fully deserves to be here with no circumstances. Their opponent, Florida, dominated in the rush mirror, but mainly due to Washington's weakness at it. Whereas the Dragons up against the Fusion last week were insane at that. So insane that I think we finally saw the final form that we could envision the Shanghai Dragons roster to become. It felt like Lee Jae-gong and Fate were finally reaching that aggressive tendency to take the tempo of the game like they did last year with Fearless. And on top of that, your MVP caliber DPS showed up big last week. And although Florida definitely has some weapons to reach almost that peak, I think the Dragons are just a few percentage higher, and I'm going to take them going all the way to the grand final. Moving on to the next matchup, we talked about this a little bit between Dallas and Chengdu. Both of them I don't really feel had the luxury of playing up against the style that would counter them, but eventually they'll reach that by the end, no matter how far they go. The truth is, I don't think you can run Symmetra and Mei outside of the ideal comps for them up against Chengdu, because they're going to run the Pharah no matter what, almost. So good luck trying that. Remember, Chengdu has one loss on the board. To who? The Philadelphia Fusion, who kind of made it look easy by playing a protect the McCree strategy with having an Ana and a McCree, means that these high-flying characters don't do as much, and Philly basically hard countered the Hunters by nano boosting Carpe over and over again. So unfortunate for Dallas that they lost Exy right before the season started. They need him in this game. Not having a McCree player, I mean, that's like the star character in the meta that counters all the Chengdu shenanery. So Dallas will have the option of either opting into the mirror of like ball Sigma comps, which to be fair, their Sigma player pounds Hanbin, but I don't know if their DPS line can play in that. Instead, otherwise, I think they are going to be forced to play their Tracer Sombra looks, because that's going to be the most flexible up against the off-angle heavy style of Chengdu. But either way, I just do not see this going well for Dallas at all, and them taking a swift trip down to the losers bracket, where they'll face the Florida Mayhem, where because the Mayhem have a breadth of strategy and enough time to prep against Dallas's best comps, I can't imagine they don't bring out the Pharah, which Yaki can play to a high level, up against like Sim Mei. So that's where I think the Dallas redemption arc train stops. I predict Chengdu to go on to play against the Dragons, who will kind of get their inflexibility exposed a bit as the Dragons, at the very worst, again, muscle through that series with enough flexibility in the different meta compositions to take it all the way to the grand final, where they'll meet either Florida Mayhem or Chengdu Hunters, depending on who pops off on the day. I think once enough game film is exposing Chengdu's weaknesses, we have the one series against Philly, but beyond that, I'm going to trust the Florida coaching staff, mainly Kuki, who demands more respect from the league at this point, continuing to bring Florida up to a very competitive degree, perhaps higher than where they might be just on paper. I expect Florida to be able to outlast the reign of terror from the Chengdu Hunters, especially when you consider Gaga's best look is the ball and OG's best look is the Winston. I think they'll simply do a better job coordinating to keep their DPS alive and get more value out of that position, and therefore win. Now, although I do reserve the right for one of these styles to prove to be dominant over the course of the tournament, but I just think when you are more of a one-note type team and there's a loser's bracket with double elim, I just can't see how more fundamentally sound teams like the Dragons or the Mayhem wouldn't make it to the end. And the only asterisk I'd say is Chengdu, but I think they've got so many of their wins by their explosive damage-centered Pharah styles that I just can't see that working up against, especially at the very least, the Dragons at the end of the season. Now, I know they played them earlier in the season and beat them, but the Dragons we saw last week are a completely different beast compared to what they brought to the table earlier in the May Melee qualifiers against the Hunters. So I find all that very interesting. We look to the rest of the standings now. The bottom 10 teams, ranking 11 to 20, mostly isn't a surprise. I mean, it might be a surprise to some people that were very upset with me when I discounted the strength of contenders and put especially EU contenders players near the bottom. Turns out Paris indeed showed up a bit stronger for the region than London, so I kind of had them mixed up, but largely all these teams are the D tier teams I talked about in my preseason tier list video for the same reasons. The only surprise perhaps is the New York Excelsior that underperformed their scrim results, but I think looking back, it should have been more obvious that Yakpung never really saw Overwatch League success. I think there might be a switch that the NYXL kick up a notch in order to loosen up when it's time for game time. Whatever they're bringing in scrims that is making people rate them highly, I think they're playing perhaps more structured when it comes to actual matches, and therefore not really performing like they expect to. That comes with experience, nerves, jitters, so there's a chance that they look a bit better, but ultimately I just think that this team might be too green, and expecting them to be D tier along with the rest of this crowd might be more of a realistic expectation moving forward. Speaking of realistic expectations, just quickly look at the middle tier of teams that just narrowly missed out on making the May Melee tournament. The Gladiators just narrowly missed the knockout rounds with a really slow start to the season, having been dominant in scrims. I think integrating the entire new roster as well as a rookie main tank wasn't as clean as they would have liked. What's going to be interesting to see is if the Gladiators can rise their peak above a team like the Washington Justice, who also has a rookie main tank. And I feel Washington's approach so far is kind of just play into their strengths, whereas I think you can see the Gladiators trying to really develop their players and synergies in a way that might be stronger for the long term, but wasn't executing intuitively enough to win some of their earlier games. We'll see how things pan out for them in the next tournament. Another team that's on the bubble, Atlanta Reign, who went 1-3 with a pretty tough schedule, just narrowly losing to the Toronto Defiant. They might be able to punch above their weight, assuming how the hero pools go from the couple tournaments we're going to have them, which to some degree is going to make balancing the game pretty wacky when they start taking heroes out, because we won't really know what the end of the season meta could be. But a team like the Reign, once you take out some of their weaker comps and they can just play a rush, they kind of go up a bit. And another team I want to highlight lower in the standings is the Hangzhou Spark, who just got a new coach, which is probably the right call for them. It's a team that just sort of always felt like a place for talented players to go to underperform, because we've seen players from the Spark now move over to the other region and look pretty good. Maybe they can go up the standings a bit if they get their coaching in order. But yeah, that's everything for this quick recap and May Melee prediction. Let me know your thoughts on the Overwatch League and this upcoming tournament in the comment section down below. If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out and let us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, click subscribe and be sure to hit the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos go live. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for Your Overwatch. We'll see you guys next time.